Welcome to Modern Anarchy, the podcast exploring sex, relationships, and liberation. I'm your host, Nicole.
I tried to keep her quiet, but she's screaming inside of me. I tried to keep her hiding, oh, shut up. I tried to keep her quiet, but she's a wild, wild woman.
On today's episode, we have Dominatrix Eva Oh. Join us for a conversation about the never-ending adventure that is connection. Together we talk about doming yourself, the shifting winds of your erotic desires, and learning to lay back and just feel pleasure. Hello, dear listener, and welcome back to Modern Anarchy. I am so delighted to have all of you pleasure activists from around the world tuning in for another episode each Wednesday. My name is Nicole. I am a sex and relationship psychotherapist with training in psychedelic integration therapy, and I am also the founder of the Pleasure Practice, supporting individuals in crafting expansive sex lives and intimate relationships. Dear listener, wow, I am just forever humbled by the power of relationships. Truly. The power of relationships to shape your sense of self, to shape your sense of reality. I mean, wow. And I'm delighted to be one of the relationships in your consciousness. Hello, dear listener. I'm so honored to be a part of the relationships in your world. And yeah, just the magic that is. Honestly, I am humbled by relationships, and I am just so honored that my life's work, my career is getting to study relationships and pleasure. I mean, dear listener, we are going to go on a long ride together during this one short lifetime of unpacking these things, and also just the inherent power dynamics that are a part of relationships. I would say that power dynamics are inherent in all relationships. Some relationships are more structured, where the power is consistently in one flow, one direction. Some of them go back and forth, right? But there is always power dynamics in our relationships. And so what does it mean to be conscious of that? What does it mean to embody your power, to hold it with confidence? The magic of seducing another human being. I mean, woof. And erotic energy is one of those strongest and most unconscious drives, dear listener. There is so much unconscious material going on up there for all of us, right? And I am just so excited to know that I will be studying this, the power of eroticism, the power of relationships with you, dear listener, in this space for many years to come. All right, dear listener, if you are ready to liberate your pleasure, you can explore my offerings and resources at modernanarchypodcast.com, linked in the show notes below. And I also want to say the biggest thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. You are supporting the long-term sustainability of the podcast, keeping this content free and accessible to all people. If you want to join the Patreon community, get exclusive access into my research and personal exploration, then you can head on over to patreon.com/modernanarchypodcast. Also linked in the show notes below. And with that, dear listener, please know that I am sending you all my love. And let's tune in to today's episode. So then the first question I like to ask each guest is, how would you introduce yourself to the listeners?
To your listeners.
Yeah.
Well, I guess
trim this as you wish, but I feel like from what I know of what you've created so far, your direction is so full of thought and wide perspective that I would hesitate to put myself into a sentence and I'd want them
Mm.
to cover it. But for ease, my name is Eva Oh, and I've been a dominatrix since 2011, and I still love the surprises that the job gives me. And I had no idea that I would be where I am doing what I do today and yesterday,
Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
let alone 13 years ago or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
Mm-hmm. And I'm excited to have you on the podcast today and get to pick your brain and that 13 years of experience.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which is making me think. I love on this podcast to hold space for each guest, their own individual story. Could you take me back to 13 years ago? What brought you into the profession and where did this start?
I think the intricacies of it started much earlier.
Mm,
My personality is in space, tends to be very assured. Yeah, and I'm able to communicate what it is that I want. I am able to understand what it is that I want. And apparently that this is not common,
right.
especially for women, apparently.
Yes.
And but I didn't understand that in the context of my family, who were all very encouraging.
Mm,
But once I started to step out of that, I understood that I needed to shift how that was a little bit and accommodate the world and make them think it was their idea. Otherwise, they would become abrasive towards me.
mm,
And so, I mean, now I can really say that sentence, but I didn't really understand that for the longest time. I was just sort of playing along with the game, trying to be part of a social, cohesive societal unit.
mm,
But me, with my opinions, way of being, it seems to inspire people to tell me things like, you'd be a great dominatrix.
mm.
No, I had no clue what this was. I sort of had this idea of this person in leather, perhaps with the whip,
Right.
but I didn't know what they did with the whip. It was just image, you know? And I
Hmm.
didn't care. I was just, they were sort of making jokes about it. And I was just being myself and I didn't think about it. But when I was in in my first proper contracted job in a corporate environment. Prior to that, I got to do a lot of different things on a shorter contract basis. But when I was in my first almost locked in contract, getting paid the most I'd ever been paid, but it was doing strategic consulting for these Fortune 500 companies. It was
Sure.
very bottom dollar, and I'm naive, idealistic me. It was just too much for
Mm,
me to handle. I couldn't put my time and my insight and my energy into lining somebody's pocket. And
right.
yeah, and so I thought, "Well, I just need to just not do this. What could I do?" And because I'd done so many things, I just Googled this word that somebody mentioned to me, and I thought, why not? It's not like I
Mm.
forever.
Mhm.
Just try.
Right.
Yeah. And it happened to be in Sydney, which is a decriminalized place for sex work. And
Nice.
so there was a dungeon. They have like health and safety standards. They have tax file number. It was just so like easy to access and safe. And so I followed the little website trail and they were taking interviews and I joined them. And yeah, here I am.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So take me through maybe even that first client. I'm thinking about my first therapy client and me shaking in my boots, going,
Oh,
how do I do this? I'm curious,
oh.
what it was like for you.
Was that during a training thing?
Yeah, yeah,
Were you
absolutely.
alone or with somebody else?
Alone, yeah, alone. They just throw you into the room.
Oh,
I talked to my supervisor. I was like, okay, well, this is the first time. Here we go. We're gonna do it. It's not like I haven't, sat
yeah.
alone with a human before, but within the container of the frame of doing that thing, yeah, they just throw you in there.
Yeah, I think when it comes to your job and your profession, it's kind of understood the responsibility. And
Mm,
so you understood the weight of that, perhaps, and which
yeah,
is why maybe it made you feel the way it did.
yeah.
But because in a lot of ways, my work is so unregulated and
Mm.
so unknown. I didn't have that expectation of myself. Now I understand that that space can come with a lot of weight, but at the time it was just like, what's this fancy room and this person asking me to do these weird things that I've never heard of, and
Uh-huh.
I'm really enjoying this, and this is so thrilling, and why are they responding in such an overt way? This is wonderful. So
Mhm.
it was my first day.
Yeah.
And I had just been shadowing the other mistresses, like just holding things, just peering into the way
Mm-hmm.
that they're talking to people. Nothing, I didn't want to like do anything on my own. But at the end of the day, I stayed there for a really long shift. It was dark already. I'd come in the morning, but it was dark by that point. And somebody came in and said, "Oh, I heard that there's a new mistress in, and I would love to meet them." And so I'm like, "Hi, yes, yes, nice to meet you. I'm the new mistress, blah blah blah." It's like, "I would love to session." And I'm like, "No, it's my first day. This is not possible. Like, there's nothing. No, this cannot be done." And he's like, "No, no, no. I'll show you what to do. I'll tell you. I'll tell you exactly how I like things." And I go back and I talk to all the other mistresses, and they're like, "You should do it." Now I realize they're probably just sort of like trying to see what the new girl's going to crack.
Sure. Yep.
I'm like, yeah, I should do it because naive me doesn't realize people can be manipulative like that. Anyway, I go back to the front room. We sort out, okay, an hour, let's try it out. Go
Yeah.
up to the room. He like starts to show me the different things in the space, and I strap him down as he mentions to this thing, and I start using this flogger for the first time that I've never ever used before, and I'm totally using it in all the wrong places. There's places you need to avoid. You shouldn't go so hard. You need to warm people up. I didn't know any of that. It's just
Right.
like hard, just going for it. And he was in bliss, like moaning, and there's these mirrors all around, and I'm just it was like exercise, and I hate exercise, but now I realize all these endorphins come from all of this action. It was just more and more and more, and I was so thrilled. I'd never seen myself in these mirrors so thrilled. That was the same feeling in almost every session
Mm.
for maybe the first year, and then I start to maybe get off of the high. But yeah, it really was such a thrill. But I didn't
Hmm.
have your operating standards, you know?
Man, let me tell you, I don't know if there's as much operating standards as you think. You know what I mean? Like
Oh, maybe.
you come in thinking they
Yeah.
teach you like different orientations, and there's just like a human in front of you, and you're like, okay, what do I actually do? So I feel you in that like fullness of the world. And
Yeah.
immediately when you were talking about the mirrors, my brain was going, yeah, like what was it like for you to look in the mirror and see yourself doing this thing? Yeah.
Crazy smile. Like I didn't realize I could smile like that.
Yeah, it's it. So I do work with psychedelics in therapy,
Uh-huh.
right? And so they
Uh-huh.
always talk about how like you know, you shouldn't look in the mirror because it's really intense to
Oh.
kind of see yourself in that state. But I think
Yeah.
just given the societal repression around sex, like you're having this moment, and I know kink, sex difference, you know, but like the eroticism, I should say, like the
Yeah.
censorship around eroticism, to look into the mirror and having this moment, that's a
Mhm.
psychedelic trip, just looking in that mirror and seeing yourself and that change of your identity in that moment.
Yeah, and this, at least I don't know how other people approach it, but I also approach it from because it's a performance, yeah.
Right.
And I have to imagine what I look like from their perspective also. And so it can be useful for me. But I tend to use mirrors a lot, whether it's a byproduct of my understanding from the dungeon or however. But I tend to like to place even those very new to me, like facing a mirror. When you say this now, I realize how confronting it might be, but I place myself in the frame also. And
Mm.
so I guess they can see me interacting with them, but they can also see us interacting. And so that tends to be very good for the whole experience. So that's why I keep doing it. But yeah, it's interesting to think of it as a head fuck essentially.
Oh,
It's a psychedelic
absolutely.
experience, which I guess is maybe a large drive behind everything that I do.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you want to say more to that?
Um, well, I think my mind loves to try to find all sorts of corners to understand, explore, be puzzled by. I just like that in general. And so when it comes to a play space and when it comes to the BDSM play space, it's like somebody's making an agreement with you to go to those corners a little bit more. And so it's very liberating for me. And I will push as hard as I think I can before they break
Mhm.
to see what those corners feel like for them and
Mhm.
for me to watch them go there. Yeah. It's
Yes.
emotionally sadistic sometimes, but it can also be incredibly liberating because
Yeah.
as we understand, if we can go into those parts of ourselves and are no longer scared of them, and we can befriend them and even enjoy them, it can sometimes walk away in a better way.
Yeah. Which,
Mm.
yeah, it makes me think about when we do psychedelics, we do integration work of, you have the experience then afterwards. And I've joked that I've wanted to do like kink integration for people of like, yeah, send me your clients and then I'll hold that space. What was it like for you to look in the mirror? Right? What was it like? What does that bring up? Like just the juiciness of being able to have people simmer in what that experience brings up for them because you're right. I can imagine that you probably get a smattering of different people who have maybe never explored any of this to maybe explored a lot of this and you kind of have to feel into kind of yeah where their edge is at and it's going to be different for each person.
Mm-mm. And it doesn't even have to be like, it can be a complete newbie to BDSM, but I think it's more about people's frankness with themselves, on themselves, yeah, than their capacity and experience in kink.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
say more
Mhm.
on that, the frankness with themselves.
Yeah, it's about a resilience of mind, if you can, if somebody comes to me and they're hiding from themselves, I mean, it can be a powerful session, but it can also be a very dangerous session because often I might be able to see them more than they want to see themselves, and I'll start to expose things about them, and I'll start to mention these things that I notice and that they react to, that they might be interested in. And if you go too far into that and they're so desperate to hide from it, they might just break, they might hate you, they might do terrible things because they are up against that uncomfortable place that they don't want to go to. And so it can be quite dangerous also for me.
Right.
Yeah. People will like project that onto you as in you're the one that's doing this to me, when really it's just you hiding from yourself. But that's happened.
Yeah, do you have a story?
One learns. Uh, and then you have some people who, maybe they've done therapy, maybe they come from communicative backgrounds, families, they're with friends and partners who are more frank with how they are and how they are with each other. And then you can start to really play, because you don't have to pick away and reveal anymore, which I do enjoy, but it can be quite painful for the other people
Mhm.
and time consuming for me. But
Mhm.
but once people are kind of honest with themselves and ready to, just understand that they're not going to be this bit of perfection or this ideal, that just know that they're kind of scummy in some corners, then we can start to really just get like messy and be like, yeah, I am a like kind of like scummy in that way,
Mhm.
or I am really needy in that way. Let's play with that. Let's like stretch that to the end. And how does that really like feel and look like? And how
Yeah.
desperate can we get? It's like you
Mhm.
really start to play with the edges of the emotional possibility. And that's a lot more fun and also a lot more safe for everybody because the people are not going to just suddenly burst and react, or we can talk about it.
Yeah, I'm hearing just the integration of the psyche, right? From these parts of ourselves that are, taboo, shadow, blah blah, whatever word we want to say about it, but to be able to actually be present with them, play with
Mm,
them, find flow state with them and be in that dynamic energy exchange with you.
yeah, that's so much fun.
Yeah.
But that's very rare. It's
Mm.
very, very rare. But I do it with myself also,
Yeah, tell me more.
So you can get little moments where I find somebody I can play with and I can like push into an idea and we can like laugh about it, and it's like a nice little shared experience. And then sometimes you see people who've really done the work and then you can just like really go wild, very rare. But because I like it and I want to access it, but I cannot because not everybody wants to play, or I want to play with them or play like that.
Mm-hmm.
I have a process in myself where I might really tease out an idea of how I feel about something or how much I'm hanging on to something. And I'll be like, but what? I play with myself, but what if that was just gone? You know?
Mm-hmm.
Or what if we just went for it and just did that specific thing that you feel deeply uncomfortable about? Like
Mm-hmm.
dumbing yourself almost, you know? It's like,
Absolutely.
okay, yeah, but it's good for me. It's like I'm a really close friend of mine, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
playmate.
exactly. Constantly looking in that mirror, I'm sure the self
Yeah.
that you see today is radically different than the 13 years ago looking in that mirror.
In some ways, yes, and in other ways, I think my capacity is much wider ranging.
Yeah.
But I think that I always say this, and people always like look at me like, "What?" because of the job and everything. But I think I'm still deeply naive at heart, you know,
Mhm.
and deeply like trusting and excited and just ready to just try. Yeah. I think the basis of that hasn't really shifted.
Mhm.
But my ability has improved, thankfully.
Mhm.
Otherwise, that's a long time to not improve a skill.
Yeah. So beautiful to hear your joy, right? And the body, the giggles, the embodiment here for you with this profession.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, like at any profession, you have your moments, and
Sure.
sometimes business gets in the way of just making financial things sit or dealing with, client relations, still the
Right.
same crap.
Yeah.
But session space and like perfect little session space. Yeah. Is that similar for you? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of enjoying the work.
Well, like a session space, like when you're
Mm.
doing that time together as opposed to how it has to sit in life. Like, do you have a preference or is it all one thing? Or
Yeah. I mean, I was just talking about this with my one of my partners who was here before. I was like, "Oh, I'm interviewing a dominatrix," and we are just bouncing off ideas about it. It was very fun. Yeah, there's something for me when I'm holding space for a client that is a specific energy exchange where I am holding the container for them to unpack their psyche, their narrative, their experience. And so there's certainly less of sharing of myself. I'm definitely there in terms of the emotional exchange of when they're, being sad. I'm moved by that experience and maybe crying with them or just feeling the weight of what they're carrying. But I'm not also saying, yeah, and then I had that same experience and this did. So it's definitely a held container. I do
yeah.
self disclose at times and I feel like it's helpful, but I really want that space for them to unpack their narrative. And so those skills and that perspective never turns off. I don't just get to come to my partners and have that part of my psyche removed or my friends, but I definitely share more of myself in those spaces with people. And I think I see the fullness in some ways of every human's existential life. Every human, you, everybody who's listening, right, has like a full world up there of families and relationships and experiences. And even the words that I'm saying right now have a whole history of meaning making of what these words mean to people. And so, yeah, when I'm snuggling up to my partner in the morning, I'm like, wow, like what a whole universe in this one body that I'm so excited to be snuggling with. So that like therapist perspective is certainly there all the time, but I'm not always holding that energetic space for everybody in the same way.
Is that a natural thing for you or
Which part?
like to compartmentalize ability or to feel more free when you're with your partner?
Well, I will say that I've been doing it for 2 years now, and the first year I lost my mind because every single conversation I was like, God, like what am I saying? I took a class on group psychology, and it was specifically going to like play parties, and then I was like watching people around, and I was like watching all of it, and I'm like, and I was like, God damn it, this has to turn off. Like I can't do this all the time, and so I will say where I'm at with it now, it's much more flexible. Where I'll see stuff, and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to engage in further conversation with this person about that because I'm not working and this is not my time. Good luck, you know? So
Yeah.
I've learned more so a lot of like boundaries in terms of when people start to go places of how do I close down this conversation because I
I'm
will,
not on the clock right now.
yeah. And then what does it mean to be on the clock, quote unquote, for your family, right? Or like what, right? What
Yeah.
does that mean look like when you have these relationships where they need help in certain ways and like to not be their therapist, but also you have the skills and it's an everyday process, let me tell you. It's
I think
weird.
anybody who's even a bit skilled at emotional labor has very hard lessons to learn about drawing those limits. Yeah.
Mhm. Which makes me curious too, like if you'd be willing to share your own personal, like erotic life, you know, what does that look like when you do the same thing, right? We're talking about my emotional caretaking, but you too must have a complex
Yeah.
relationship to the erotic for yourself.
Yeah, and like we don't have schools, we don't have I mean, we have some elders who have been
Right.
in things, but it's all very anecdotal, one not necessarily studied. I'm not really sure where to go to sometimes for me to get
Mm,
frameworks for understanding how I could do things better. But
mm. It's tough.
yeah, and also because I started working. Yeah, sure, there's a curiosity, but like I needed money, though I just
Right.
need to survive.
Right.
And that it didn't actually pay me very well for maybe the first year or two. And now I'm stable, but it took a lot of business mind to get to this point.
Sure.
And my focus has been that. Sure, it's been a great journey in terms of how I've grown emotionally, how my emotional and intellectual skills have grown, how my technical ability. It's been wonderful, but my main objective getting into it and in general is the financial stability of myself and my family. And
Mhm.
so with that as a focus, I haven't had time to think about what myself, like what I
Mm,
really wanted
yeah.
side of this context until very recently.
Wow.
Like the last year or
Yay.
so, it's really been about how can I make my work better? Yeah, until I felt a little bit more financial room last year.
Hmm.
And I thought, okay, I'm gonna start dating.
Yeah.
I've had relationships throughout, but I didn't realize that I was operating in the workspace in my personal life until I could really have some financial freedom and then freedom for me.
Totally.
Yeah. So last year I started dating and the erotic self there, it's very similar in some ways in that I do still feed off of somebody's perception of me. Yeah. And that's such a huge thing of the job. I do get turned on by my job from that perspective.
Sure.
Doesn't matter like if they're absolutely not attractive to me or however. If they are drawn to the experience and I can see that through their skin, then I'm really into it.
Right.
And there's still an aspect of that with my personal life, but actually I'm much more lazy and I like it.
Yeah.
I've I've learned to be lazy. I've learned to, just not do very much and just to offer them my feet to let them do their thing
Hmm.
and not to be too active. And I don't think that I want to take a submissive role. I'm totally open to what that feels like, but it's very unfamiliar to me.
Hmm.
But I've definitely learned to have smaller actions, to not think of creating like this elaborate mind or how things are in a room. I'm just really just like, I'm gonna lie back and you're gonna do stuff.
And you deserve that. Right? Yeah.
Long time.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, so it's been fun, but I don't know where it's gonna go. I'm sure it will shift. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
Right, exactly. That's what I was imagining maybe would be like the erotic space for you, given so much of the ways you hold the container to have
Mm.
yourself held and not have to do as much as yeah, like you said, the eroticism of knowing their image of you and the energy exchange that is. I'm sure you're doing, I know that you're doing so much cognitive work up there thinking about that, thinking that I could imagine letting go to not have to be in that space is almost, that balance and that erotic charge on the other side.
I think it's been a long time that I've just laid back and felt pleasure, rather than having to direct it to make it happen. Yeah. Now I've become very like picky with I used to think, oh, it doesn't matter what people look like or what people are like. I can just interact with them. It's fine. It's because I was doing everything to make it happen.
Right.
I'm really just like, why am I just not interested? It's like, oh, because I need them to do something now. Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's funny how it took this long, but I understand why. Yeah. And we'll see. Who knows what I'll be doing like in 2 years, Maybe I'll be one of those huge cruises to Jamaica. That's like those big sex parties that I think that I would hate. But maybe I'll be a swinger.
Totally. I mean, that's what I hear again and again from everybody, right? It's like just when you think you know what it is that gets your socks off, it's like, damn, it just floats away in the wind. And, I came from a very puritanical Christian society. Like I wore a purity ring, I did the whole thing, So for me, some of my first like deep eroticism BDSM play was just like the dirty slut horror narrative and what that did for me as someone with all of that shame and repression and
Uh-huh.
doing this podcast space, having so many conversations, and the way that that almost like, took away the charge from it as I've let go of the shame. And now it's not as that exciting thing anymore. And it's like, damn, just when you think you've got, the thing that does it, it just
Yeah.
floats away. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah. Well, I guess that means you're just being very dynamic with your life. So it depends what you want, right? So I guess you can
Mhm.
continue to be this beautifully dynamically engaged person, or you can just stick your feet in the mud. What do you
Right.
want to do? I mean, both fine.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I
But
know.
I guess, yeah, know where that is, perhaps.
Right. Which I think then is the positive frame in terms of rather than like, oh, I'm so confused. It's that, oh, wow, I have a whole lifetime to explore my psyche, to explore my body, to explore energy exchange with other people.
Yeah, yeah,
Whoa, like
yeah,
it isn't going to be static. I'm always going to be exploring this and finding new things. And what joy.
yeah, yeah. So, what do you think's next?
Man, I want to be able to orgasm without being touched,
Okay, okay. Like even yourself. Yeah.
Part of me just thinks it's like how much time could I get away from specifically therapy brain, which is like deep thinking to actually just feel my body and work on that deeper connection to my breath. I think but that takes intentional meditation and other
It's a lot
things.
of work. You love to
Yeah,
work.
exactly. I need to sit down and stop actually doing my job to do this other thing.
I need to go on a small break for
Yep.
about 6 months. I'm working on no contact orgasms.
Which I call prayer to the divine, which is maybe my own reclaiming of Christianity shit. But I'm like, I need to pray for 10 minutes and just feel.
We're getting back to a format, in another format that's
Yeah.
potentially more pleasure filled, which is wonderful.
Mhm.
I don't know
Mhm.
what mine is though. I don't
Yeah.
know. Yeah, I feel a little like also I just left or he just left like my main client.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I have clients who are, I mean, I choose them because they fit enough, but I haven't chosen them because they fit with me, you
Mm.
know. They
Right.
fit for the purpose as
Right.
they should be. And it's only recently happened. I think the realization of it only maybe settled in yesterday or the day before.
Okay.
And immediately when that happened, there was this it literally felt like a weight gone. I've never had that before.
Wow.
Like, but like the literal feeling like, and I felt nicer, like kinder, like I could be kinder,
Mhm.
like I have more space for that. And I'm wondering what that's going to do to my erotic exploration.
Yeah.
Because I do a lot of things around humiliation, degradation,
Sure.
really harsh, like unraveling.
Hmm.
And I don't know whether I have that charge at the moment. Maybe
Mm.
I'm going to become like a mommy dom. Maybe I'll start like lactating.
Yeah. Hold them close. I want you to feel good. You're so beautiful, right?
Yeah, but if you told me that like last month, I'd be like, ew.
I know. Oh, I know. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, if somebody else is doing it, cool. But like for me, yeah.
I know. I
So,
know.
so yeah, just so surprising. It's wonderful. I
Right.
like it, but it can also probably be exhausting for people to try to keep up with your dating profiles.
Exactly. Yes, absolutely.
What do you?
We gotta check in often. Yeah. And maybe even given the ways that you've been doing so much work, so much business, so much all of this to explore dating, right? I'm curious. There's so much erotic charge thinking about, when I was saying just the existential narratives of knowing, when you're in partnership that you're building that narrative together and that story as you meld, your time and energy to actually share space together. And for me, that's its own erotic charge as well. So maybe that is part of like the next space.
Interesting to think about also because I think that, I was talking about how I would always push and I would be the one making sure pleasure would happen and I would be the one I feel like I've been leading and the job has been an opportunity for me to be able to do that, good skill set, whatever.
Mhm.
But I've also been running my relationships.
Ah,
And so I'm now open to what you just said. I haven't really thought about it in that kind of
yeah,
frame,
yeah,
but letting it be its own energetic thing that is growing that I don't push.
sure.
Interesting experiment.
Yeah.
I'll call you when I'm crying about it.
Yeah, you can
You
text
might
me,
have
we'll
to love
chat.
yourself for that.
Oh my goodness. Well, it's so wild because like we are, you were looking into the mirror of that moment, right? Seeing yourself, but our relationships are mirrors. And so we give
Mm.
off something and quite literally, like right now in this moment, I can't see myself. I can't see my face because I turn that off in Zoom because that drives me crazy. And so when I am emoting, I am looking to you as my mirror, right? And so if you start to smile with me, I feel good about what I'm doing. If you look at me sternly, I'll be like, oh God, what am I doing? You see this with babies, right? They look to their parents to emote with them. And so, yeah, just thinking about partnerships when we're in that deep space, so much of our sense of self ends up being created through that experience and just the magical unpredictable nature that is. I mean, I don't know. I practice non-monogamy, and so just even to see myself mirrored through different relationships, whoa,
Hmm. Yeah.
whoa.
Would you be interested to say if that self looks very different or a little bit different or
It depends. Yeah. I mean, I've been trying to get more and more integrated, but what I've found is that find one person who brings out sides of yourself that are different, and you're like, oh yeah, these are parts of myself too. But yeah, they're all very different people, and I'm sure people, even dear listener, your friends, right? You have
Mm,
some friends that like to do this activity, some friends that like to do this, and how you find yourself in the center of that, and then particularly when we end up having sex with multiple people or play all of these different things, yeah, I mean, not all of my people want to do the same things. And so then, yeah, I do see parts of myself reflected in different spaces.
mm, yeah, I've been running my relationships. I keep using that phrase.
Mm. Yeah, there it is. Yeah.
Running my business slash relationships. No, it's running my relationships in it's always very service based.
Mm,
Like they are in service to me, they will do things for me, they are available to me.
mhm.
Yeah, that is kind of the dynamic that
Yeah,
I'm very used to now.
sure.
I'm wondering if that's going to shift now that I maybe feel a little bit looser.
Yeah, like giving service to someone in a less structured container.
I'm also quite good at the emotional labor.
Mm,
That has always been my thing that I would contribute. And I think my way of trying to make up for how much I probably have overdone it in the past is to make sure that they're doing service for me. I'm kind of controlling it in that way. It's a format that seems to work, but I don't know. We'll see.
Hey, I mean, I wonder the same damn thing sometimes, right? Because, like, specifically in my job, I study so
Yeah.
much relationships that then I'm like, is it ethical to have a
Oh,
relationship with someone who doesn't have the same level of awareness? Like, is that weird? Like, oh, like that's weird. And
do
and then
they
I'm
talk about that in your field?
It's something I think about often, honestly,
Yeah.
because of course you cannot date your clients, and you're setting up in a very specific container like that ethically is very clear. But yeah, what does the conversation look like of, oh, under capitalism, people are stuck in certain jobs where they never spend the amount of time that I am spending thinking about emotional insight. And so yeah,
Mm,
when I connect with someone, I might see things immediately that they don't, and then
yeah.
like, yeah, is that even ethical because there's an inherent power dynamic. But I mean, this is where when I'm holding space for them, they're like, "Oh, I want to cook you dinner and other stuff." I'm like, "Cool, great. This feels like a fair exchange, I guess." Like I don't, man, I don't know. I don't have an answer for that one. Not
But
clear.
like, do all the psychologists like get together and be like, yeah, and then they did this thing, and I knew that they were doing this thing, and you do too, ha ha ha. But then we did that thing. But of course, because I wanted that to happen. Do these things happen?
Yeah, I mean, I process my relationships with my psychologist friends, and we're like, "Oh, that's that acting up." Yeah, I know, but I have no idea what the ethical nature is of any of this. Truly, it's way too
Yeah,
complex. But it is a question under capitalism, right? Like when
yeah,
people are locked to survive in this structure, and I think it's also important to say that we don't know everything as psychologists, right? We're just like, we're just therapists who are learning, and exploring. But under capitalism, there is a real reality that if you're working a service job, all of that time and energy is spent in that service versus I'm sitting here in the complexities of this. And that creates a very inherent power dynamic that I feel rather uncomfortable about. And I'm only just starting this job, so I have no idea, like 20
can't
years
wait
into
to
it.
see the potential manipulation in 10 years.
Yes.
Yeah, you can come talk to the sex workers. We have a similar thought.
Exactly. I can imagine, right? Like you see stuff, like if you're, you would have connected with me or anybody earlier in my life where sex was so repressed, you would see so much of my psyche that I would have no idea about.
Well, not only that, I mean, it's just like very basic human interaction stuff too, not
Mm,
even in terms of sexuality, like how people come to you with their stories and their woes and their family stories and however, and they think of you on a very personal level, even though for you it's a professional level, mixing a little bit with the personal. And so you just see these people and these patterns again and again and again. And like you, we don't, in order to survive the job, you don't really give out yourself, because you're seeing like 5, 8 people a day. It's like you can't give that. But but yeah, you just start to see patterns of people and you
mhm.
start to know what little thing that you say about something will work or that won't work. And it's the same sort of advantage. Obviously, it's not going to be on the same level as if you are so informed by the study of what you get to be informed by, but it's still higher than average
Absolutely.
knowledge
Yes.
in potential manipulation.
Yes.
And you've really got to have my father, my original father was a barrister, and even though he didn't practice so much, he managed to just like swindle his way into so many random boards, and it was like ridiculous to watch. Thankfully, I didn't have much to do with him, and my current father is so much sweeter.
Mhm. Yeah.
I sometimes feel like I can feel his mind in me.
Mm.
But thank God I have the value set of my family. Otherwise, I would be the biggest asshole.
Mm.
So I guess it's the same for the job, it's like you get all of these potential skills, this knowledge, and I guess it depends on your value set as to whether you're going to completely ruin somebody's life and use them or not.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure maybe that ties into those feelings around performance.
Which part? Which part?
Talking about the work being a performance, right? Like I'm curious how you conceptualize that, knowing that you do have all this power and harnessing it for good, but then it also being a performance aspect. How does that all tie in for you?
A lot going on, isn't it? I guess that's why I keep doing it.
Oh, hey, me too. I love the work like there's so much relationally
Yeah,
going on to play with.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Keeps me occupied.
Yeah.
Keeps my Otherwise, I'd probably get in more trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know what that would
Yeah.
be like. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
thinking even too, like within my frameworks of thought, I studied like feminist psychology and they would talk about being authentic, right? So maybe even curious reframes here, performance versus authenticity. So I try to think about coming into the space authentically. And I remember going through school wondering, okay, what is authenticity when you say you have a client who's been saying the same story again and again, and you're like, God, I'm just frustrated that you won't make this change. And like, it's so annoying to hear you say this again and again. You don't say that, right? So then I was like, what does it mean to be authentic, but not
Uh,
share the full experience? And my professor kind of framed it through this lens of authenticity being the choice, right? I'm going to choose in this moment to show up in a loving, kind way for this person, which is to hold that back. And so I do try to think about that in all of my relationships, even my romantic sexual relationships of I might be having these thoughts going on, but I'm going to make the choice of what's the best thing to say for this person. And that's not me being inauthentic or performing. It's that my authenticity comes through the choice.
okay, all right. I mean, that's a nice way of settling it for yourself for sure.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, yeah. Because we
A
don't
lot
have
of
to,
leaps.
yeah, we don't have to say all the bad stuff.
But I get how that's a very useful framework. I don't know whether I could. I guess you could train yourself, like I could train myself to think of it that way, but I'm a little bit more reactive than
Mm,
that. Yeah. And I guess also I'm not working within a framework where I have to care.
right.
Like, yeah. It's helpful for the job if you do, and it's helpful for continued income if you do. But is it helpful for my sanity? I think is the question that I ask myself more.
Yeah.
For better or for worse, could I say, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, but that's interesting. I'm going to be thinking about that. I don't know how I could apply that potentially. But at the moment where my mind goes is more, you've said this many times. I'm going to tell you exactly what I think of you. And if you break, I don't care because I never have to hear about it again.
Mm,
That's kind of where I go. But also, I think there's something in the fact that people have agreed to come into a power dynamic
yes.
that makes that brutal honesty a little bit softer
Hmm.
sometimes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because that's what they want.
Yeah, so I guess that's why I gravitated towards this also because
Yeah.
I don't know how to do those nice, societally friendly leaps of thought.
Right. Right. Yeah, that is drastically where we differ because that's what someone wants. And I'm supposed to be the like soft kind, like, like, which is why, okay, yeah, see, we were talking about my own play, right? Like, for
Yeah.
myself, it's really hard to fathom being degrading, like, really hard because I think my brain is so trained in this, like, loving kindness, right? So to play on the other side almost, God, it just feels like that voice is not even there to be like that. I didn't see. I just like,
Is it of interest in any way?
oh, totally. I've tried gently, because again, integration, right? Integration. When someone's consensually asking to go to that space, hell
Uh-huh.
yeah, let's go to that space. And then I'll snuggle you afterwards and hold you and give you a kiss, right? Like, let's
Okay.
integrate all of these sides of our psyche so that I can find balance. Because I think I am so in the loving kindness, which I'm still there, but to be able to play in the other side, I think that
Yeah.
is something for me that I would like to stretch into because all my
Mm.
day I'm holding that love that to give the other side of love through being degrading I think would be really fun and a good balance for me personally.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I also get the sense that you'd be very good at it. Because a lot of it is about noticing things. Yeah, you
Mm.
don't even need to add very much. I think people give enough material.
Say more. I'd love to learn from your brain, your wisdom.
When you were talking about how you wanted to give somebody what it is that they're asking for and you can cuddle them after, I guess there are gradations of the ethics here of what's possible, but I kind of feel that it's my skill really developed from a frustration, yeah, and from an inability to express what I was really thinking about the world around me. And because primarily a lot of my clients were men and still are, but we're going to talk about an earlier time, were men. It was easier for me because all of the frustrations were about patriarchal
Hmm.
oppression. And so I would pick out these things about how they were and their place in the world and their unseen privilege and just like spit it at them. And it
Yeah.
was like easy fodder, you know?
Yes.
And it
Yes.
just taught me to just like notice these things and just pick them up about people. When I play with women, it's harder for me because I don't have that
Right.
inherent material
Right.
and I have too much of a shared experience and an empathy for that experience that I don't want to go there. Unless I see somebody really hungering for it. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm such a sucker for the hunger that I might start just feeding into just describing what's happening between us in a nastier way. And that seems
Right.
to also be enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so I think that sometimes playing with people that you don't really like is what can teach you about
Yeah.
your capacity in
Yes.
that direction.
Hmm. It's validating to hear that because I've definitely felt that difference in terms of like the gender dynamics of privilege and power and how it's much easier to give that space to someone who has it. And
Yeah.
so yes, I've definitely been in that space too. And there's definitely been fantasy worlds of myself where I'm like, what if I could do psychology and play like this? And like,
I mean, you can.
I know I've gotten off on that fantasy a handful of times, but then I'm just scared that it would then become the job. And then like how much of that would be then my psyche like you of like holding so much that like, God, what kind of submission, restraint, bondage would I need to fucking let go? You know, like it's a dream. It is a dream. I'm not gonna lie. I think that play therapy, right? We do play therapy with kids. Like,
Yeah.
what is play therapy with adults with kink and BDSM? Hey, you want to
Yeah.
write the training with me? I mean, I'm fascinated.
I'm available to
Okay,
chat whenever you wish.
got
You have
it.
my Zoom number or whatever this is.
Totally. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot there.
Yeah, I live in a lived experience too much to sit down and write the complexities of this. I'm writing a memoir at the moment, but it's
Love
pretty
that.
shallow because I want people to read it.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah, I'm almost done. It just took me 6 years, but anyway,
Nice.
but yeah, it's a real honor to be able to step into such a playful space with not yet like fully formed, but like adult minds, like
Mhm.
still forming minds. It's really, it's it's electric. There's nothing like it. Yeah, there's nothing like
Mhm.
it. But like you say, when you are the kind of person that thinks and interacts with life and its corners and likes it, it can become very complicated.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's like what I also said. I need the stimulation and I need the challenge. And I think I found my sweet spot, even though it can come with bullshit, also my own and other
Sure.
people. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's different. Every day is different. Every single day. You might see the same pattern, sure, 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 but the actual energetic exchange, that moment, like just the complexity of your work, I'm sure it's there's patterns, but still it's so novel each time that you're stepping into that moment of presence with another human.
Mm. Yeah, and to answer your thought about what would it take to help you find that point of submission, like how many restraints?
Yeah, a lot.
For me, it took COVID, not being able to see my family for 2 years, and a divorce.
Yeah, that will hit you like a whammy, I can
I was
imagine.
so lost, but I was just off with the wind, and yeah, and I started taking mushrooms, and
Sure.
yeah, and that was like a perfect point for it too, because you weren't rigid. Well, I wasn't as rigid anymore, and so
Mhm.
it was like a really good spot to it. And so I guess it's not like necessarily only submission in a sexual sense, but
Right.
it's all interconnected in terms of
Yes.
how safe or how lost you might feel and ready to be held. Yeah. I think these
Yeah.
go through peaks and troughs, and so I don't know what my next peak or trough is, and I hope they're the same thing.
Right. I'm I'm curious. I'd love to hold space for you and unfolding your narrative right now in our conversation. Any takeaways from that significant period of the divorce, the COVID, the no family, and the psychedelics, in
Yeah.
this moment here? Like, what was the big takeaway for you?
Well, my family are so valuable to me. I always knew that, but I think I didn't realize how lost I would be without being able to see them.
Yeah.
Because even though we live very far away from each other, the fact that I couldn't see, like, they closed the borders to my country
Wow.
essentially, and they couldn't even let nationals in.
Wow.
And so just that I couldn't access them, and there was no knowing when that could happen. It was just so untethering, and I didn't realize that that would be the case. And so it was a good like trial run as before they go.
Yeah.
I'm gonna now I know, get a dog. Just get a dog.
Or two. Hmm.
Have something to like love you unconditionally and look
Yep.
at you, need
Yep.
you.
Yeah.
One
Hmm.
of those pathetic people in the end.
Hey, I'm with you. Hey, when my cat passes, I'm getting a kitten immediately. I'm not processing any of that. I refuse. Next. Whew, my heart, too soft, too soft.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, I'm sure there were many others, but that was probably the largest thing. And now, like I used to, now I call them to ask of things more than I used to.
Mm.
So it's nice to have learned to lean on them more, you know?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even for things that I don't really like, they're not that important. Like I can't remember what choice I was making. It was just between two objects or something. And I'm like, well, what do you think I should get? I'm not really sure.
Mm.
We'll
Yeah.
deliberate. They'll pick up at 5 in the morning.
Yeah. Yeah, but the joy that they know your story, right? Like you're letting them in. Maybe we don't need them, we can use words like we can use words like interdependent, right? Rather than codependent. And in that you're like pulling them in and you
Mm,
know, there's so much love in that. And hey, I'm deciding between these. Like I want to hear your perspective. Like come into this moment with
yeah.
me and share this moment together.
Yeah. And if I like really put the energy in, I'm sure I could make a decision, but I kind of feel like I just want to release and not do that energy. And so I guess that is like a parallel of what else could be possible. Yeah, in terms
Mhm.
of relationship or in terms of erotic interaction. So I guess that's a learning, like how do I create that interdependence
Mm.
and just release into it,
Mm.
weigh that responsibility. But then you have to trust somebody like how much I trust my parents.
R- Right. I'm already hearing in my head like free fall, right? To actually let go and let that happen, free
Yeah,
falling. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, we'll see. I guess it can be segmented. Like when I'm telling people about when people ask, oh, how do you even learn how to like ask for what you want or play in a space of power dynamics? I'm like, just start small, just do it for 5 minutes over breakfast. It doesn't have to
Mhm.
be a charged like context.
Right.
Yeah. Over the next 5 minutes, I'm going to tell you exactly how much sugar to put in that coffee. And it doesn't matter what I say, you're just going to keep doing it.
Ah,
Yeah.
ah.
So I guess this needs to be something that I can also do for myself.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, and thinking about not getting to see your family too, right? And all the complexities of that, right? If we think about relationships as mirrors, you were missing a significant mirror to yourself and the ways that that can affect how we feel about ourselves and our day to day. I mean, this is why when people go home for the holidays, they're like, "Wow, like I regressed hard." It's like, "Yeah, your mirror's changed, my friend," like yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm
Mm,
very lucky. They're the most easygoing
good.
people around. Like I guess it's from sheer fact of knowing each other for so long, but also just so kind and like perceptive. Yeah. So
Mhm.
I think maybe it's just being more mindful of gravitating towards those types of entities
Yeah.
in order to form more
Mhm.
relaxed and trusting bonds.
Yeah, I'm really excited for you to see where that journey takes you. Hmm.
Oh, look at that. Walked away with some learnings.
Yeah, me too. That's when it's a joy. Yeah. Yes. And I'm
Uh,
thinking too, I think I also just want to name the power when you were talking about playing with, men who have experienced privilege and had that, experience and being able to like channel that anger and frustration in that moment, in
mhm.
a consensual power dynamic where that's what they're wanting, right? That's the huge difference. You and I know that, but God, I sometimes feel the need to just like say it to other people, like, this is all consensual, folks, like Jesus. But just the emotional maturity to do that with the people in your life And,
Mm.
when I've been coming through non-monogamy, there's been a lot of insecurity to unpack, a lot of jealousy to unpack, and being able to say, like, hey, I want to do this cuckolding scene. I know it's coming from a space of insecurity and tenderness around our dynamics to my metamor, right? Like, I would love for you to watch this. Does that
Mhm.
sound exciting to you? Sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Great. Now we're going to play with this tender charge of our dynamic rather than me making side comments, blah, 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 making little like to actually have the insight that I am having this emotional experience and tenderness, and I would like to play with it if you are on board.
Mm.
Oof, that's so mature.
Yeah, it's a lot of being kind and clear to ourselves in order that we can have that awareness of ourselves and then the courage or at least the trust to be able to say that and understand that no matter the consequence, we will walk away with everything that we are. I think that's a lot of it's a process that people are not familiar with, sadly. Everybody would be having a lot more fun if they were.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm glad.
exactly.
So, how did the cuckolding scene go?
It was great. We talked before and after, which
Yeah.
ultimately ends up taking up off the charge, because now we're even
Yeah.
closer, but that's the
Yeah.
fun of it, right? To be able to have that space where you're like, I have this energy, and we talk
Mm.
about it beforehand, everyone checks in, we talk about it afterwards. And yeah, now it's not as exciting because it's less like there's less jealousy going on. But like to be able to actually like name that and have that there, I mean, I think
Yeah.
that you're right, though. It takes a lot of communication, a lot of emotional insight, a lot of things that under capitalism, again, when we're having to work these other jobs, these are not skills that we are able to really spend time investing in.
Yeah, like I was poor for the longest time just so that I would sit alone and think of these things. So, you make your choices.
Right.
Starve or
You don't even want to know my student loan. You don't even want to know. I'm a very expensive sports car. Vroom vroom. It's really, really fancy. It makes a damn good podcast though. Shit, right? Like it's fun.
Yeah, I'm so
Yeah.
impressed with what you've done with the podcast also. Like
Thank
you
you.
have so many really interesting conversations. It's really a
Mm.
testament to your mind. It's really lovely to see.
Oh,
So
thank
thank you
you.
for adding me to that also, by the way.
Yeah, and thank you for shaping mine, right? I get shaped by all these different relationships. So I'll certainly take away the pieces from our conversation into the
Yeah.
future.
Maybe you need to combine the religious iconography and the cuckolding. Maybe then the
Hey,
charge back.
divine sexuality. I do work with clients in that space. That is 100% my like joy space to work with people and
Okay.
reclaiming and getting to this level of play with their dynamics. It's my joy,
Mm.
and I hope to spend truly the rest of my life in that space.
So divine sexuality, how does that meet with religious iconography? Does it?
Um,
Or is it more spirituality
I
and
think it's more spirituality for me trying to get out
Mhm.
of the structures, but I just think that in a lot of religious spaces, we have these feelings of the spirit taking over, flow
Mm.
state, that feeling in the body, the connection with community, and there are a lot of other ways to experience that through pleasure, particularly through eroticism, right? Talk about life force energy. I haven't even studied anything of the tantric. I haven't even gone in yet. I'm in school, but like just thinking about those sorts of lineages and life force energy, I think that in our lifetime to be able to be with another person and explore connection and the pleasure that is capable within our bodies, I don't know what's more divine than that, right? And the centuries of shame and repression, I just take a deep frustration to the ways that it's disconnected us from truly embodying more pleasure. So I find that spiritual, and
Mm.
it's definitely comes from my space of, the pain that it brought me at the beginning, but now to be here and to advocate for that. I mean,
Mm.
I cry about the journey that, hearing listeners just tell me how much these podcasts have changed their life and their experiences to play. Like I could die now pretty
Yeah,
happy
yeah,
knowing.
that's great. Yeah, I'm very
Yeah.
happy for you. That's
Mm.
a very incredible place to be in one's life also, to
Mm.
understand how much of an imprint you have already contributed.
Yeah.
So fantastic.
Thank you.
Congratulations. I was
Yes.
more thinking like, all right, so let's all go to a church kind of a thing,
Hey,
and I'm the priest. But yours is much sweeter.
hey, I mean, one of the play spaces I went to was called Temple, which was
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I
really,
mean, a lot of the tantric things, they're
yeah.
called temples, right?
Yep.
Yeah. There was so I lived in Bali for a while, and it was more base than anything. And but then I was there during COVID, and so I started to actually meet people because usually I was just traveling to work and then coming back and just resting.
Hmm.
And a lot of people there are in the sacred sexuality space, the
Right.
tantric sort of whatever space,
Right.
and I had no knowledge of it at all. And I don't know, but I never managed to connect with the information. Like I went to temple nights,
Yeah.
and because I know how to drop into space and
Right.
and like just make something like work, there's a performative aspect to it, and
Yep.
or just go into that part of myself. It's not difficult for me, and so I would step into it. But I wouldn't step out of it feeling like I had gained
Mm.
anything or that it was particularly nourishing. Am I just not the target demographic, or like what am I not understand? Like there's something about it that's just not understood by
Hmm.
me, I guess.
Totally. Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
I don't know what's
fair.
happening there because it seems to be such a powerful thing for so many people. Yeah.
Well, so
And
is Christianity, so I don't know, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, you know what I mean? So is Mormonism, so is lots of stuff, so I don't
right,
know.
yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. So, yeah, I guess whatever. And it is a very religious experience, I guess, the tantric community,
Yeah.
at least the ones that I was seeing. And
Hmm.
maybe I don't work very well within that framework also. So maybe I'm reacting to many different things.
Yeah, and sometimes it's really hard when there's yeah, depending on where you're at, right? We can say it's kind of like kink, you say kink and it's like, what do you mean? Like tantra, there's sometimes very gendered dynamics around it that are very like masculine femme that are
True.
very strict that I really don't appreciate. And
Yeah.
they're even like the practice of like semen retention, recycling energy, right? Like what an interesting I listen to a lot of
Eat
tantra.
it.
I listen to a lot of tantra podcasts and try to like
Yeah.
learn from them,
Okay. Okay.
and I sometimes
Okay.
like bite my tongue at moments, but like I'm like, cool, what can I learn from this? But yeah, like just like semen retention. And he was just talking about how like he's like, yeah, I don't want to have the ejaculation because it releases my energy and then for the rest of the day, like I can't really function and evolutionarily, like that's, that means that we go to sleep and all of these things. And so I just retain it, which like
It
cool.
works for you. All right. Cool.
Glad it
Good.
works for you, right? But again, like Christianity works for people, Mormonism works for people. So who knows existentially where that's resonating and what sort of frame that's putting on their existence of I work in this way of energy exchange and all that sort of stuff. I do love the intimacy of some of it, like even the tantric practices of the hand on the heart and your eye gazing. And
Mm, mm,
God, the
mm,
amount of people that can't even have sex without looking into the eyes of the other person. I mean, shit, like for someone that's revolutionary. And maybe for
mm.
you, that's like, oh, I looked in the mirror 17 years ago and saw this stuff. You know what I mean? So it doesn't even resonate in your frame in the same way.
I know I did maybe about 10 years ago I did an eye gazing
Yeah.
and I cried. Yeah, because it
Yeah.
was a stranger and you can't really
Oh,
have those kinds of experiences with strangers. This was like a
yeah.
relief for me. Yeah, because I'm happy to have that kind of connection with anyone, at least momentarily,
Right.
that we are agreeing to. So I get it. And I would like to get it more, I guess is what I'm
Sure.
saying, because there's some things about it that feel like potentially powerful, but there's something like you mentioned about the language, about the gender dynamics, about the dressing of it also,
Mm-hmm.
that I guess is there like a slightly more contemporary tantra?
Hey, you're looking to the girl who's curious. As I also teach yoga, right? So like you're looking to the
Okay,
woman
okay.
who's trying to explore and bring it in, right? Because like what would it mean to talk about, oh, we're moving energy through our parasympathetic nervous system that's helping us to relax, or the sympathetic, right? Rather than a chakra system. I mean,
Okay. Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
curious. So
Yeah, okay. I'll
stay
be listening
tuned.
to those
Yeah.
a little bit more too then. Yeah.
Yeah, because I do think it's powerful. And like again, if I want to orgasm without being touched, I
Yeah.
think that's where I want to go to learn more about it.
Yeah. Okay. It'd be interesting also to know what different possibilities there would be for you to get to that point.
Right.
Not only Tantra, but I don't know. I mean, I have no idea.
Totally.
Also. I guess it depends maybe how much you react to something. Like sometimes it can be like just words, like when you have people in bondage and there's a lot of words
Right.
sometimes. Yeah, that
Mm-hmm.
can happen. So
Absolutely.
I guess that's like is maybe hypnotism in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah. See
Look at
you later.
see Yeah, endless world of exploration. And this is why it's just so fascinating. Like the clinical psychology food field has nothing on this. Again, I started this work because I volunteered as a sexual assault counselor and I was like, wow, I want to help people. And getting into the field and then realizing there was no training on what it means to go from the initial trauma narrative into pleasure. It's just like a huge lacking part of the whole equation. So I'm hoping to be able to study that aspect of it of pleasure and what it means to come back to embodiment and play. And
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. It's such a searching for people that
Hmm.
even just with the what you just said, it seems to be like such a common desire these days. Yeah. People know that it's something that's possible, but everybody's scurrying trying to find the parts. Yeah.
Hmm.
Which I
Yeah,
guess, I mean, I get a lot of people who come to me asking similar questions.
sure.
Yeah, and but I don't like I've mentioned to you before, and I just don't really know what to tell them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's hard.
So I'm going to be looking forward to your paper. Read it.
I'll bring you back on the podcast in a decade. We'll check in. We'll see what we've learned in that time, right? Yeah,
Or I will strap you to my bondage chair and I will read it to you. How about
absolutely. I love that. Very fun. Yeah. Well,
that?
it has been such a pleasure to talk to you
Yes, likewise.
today.
Thank you.
I want to hold a little bit of space just to check in with each guest. I always take a deep breath. And I ask if there's anything left on your heart that you want to share with the listeners. Otherwise, I have two closing questions I want to ask.
Oh, I just hope that they understand how wonderful it is to have you as a resource.
That's so sweet of you.
And me.
Yeah, hell yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's been a joy. It's truly been a joy. I love it. I'm feeling the energy and the life force. So thank
Yeah,
you.
thank
Yeah.
you. It's been fun. And the question.
Yes. The first question I've been trying on that I've been enjoying is if you could close your eyes and look back to your past self.
Mhm,
Maybe this is 13 years ago when you're first stepping into the dungeon. Maybe this is a different point that's coming to mind for you earlier or later.
mhm.
I'm curious with the wisdom that you have now, what would you say to that younger self?
Do it all.
Jump in the water, go.
Make all the same bloody mistakes. You're doing great. Try
Amazing.
just as hard as you want to. Uh,
Mm,
just do it all. You did great.
mhm, I love that. Such good words.
I survived, like it's cool. It's fine.
Totally. You're thriving, dare I
Yeah.
say. Yeah. Yeah. And the last question I ask every guest is, what is one thing that you wish other people knew was more normal?
Ooh, feeling lost.
Yeah, you want to say more?
Mm, I think people put so much pressure on themselves to, oh, I am this definitive thing and I move this way through the world and I'm going to find myself and I'm going to act like this and I'm going to be like that and people are going to see me like this. It's like, nah. Not really control other people's perception of you, even when you have them strapped to a bondage chair
Right.
and you've put all the marketing out. And it's the end of the day, other people's perceptions of you is going to be very hard to control. So let's not worry about that one right now. And your concept of you is never going to be complete. And what that's going to be is always going to be shifting. So
Mhm.
forget about that stupid idea that you need to be this thing and to be
Uh,
like that and to present like this. It's just like everybody is just one lost mess, and we should enjoy it.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, have you seen the size of this universe? Do you think we have some
Yeah.
control? I mean, whoa, it's a yes and, but whoa. No. And hopefully that gives people the space to the freedom to flow in their life, right? In existence, to know that they don't have to be these concrete boxes of existence to like we were talking about earlier, like following the winds of our pleasure and where that takes us, and just trusting in that.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess like kind to yourself, but also maybe find people around. If you feel like it's just not possible, it might just also be the choices that you have around you, like the people that you have around you, the limitations of that. And
Right.
I guess sometimes we need to compartmentalize a little bit, but if we can even just give ourselves a little bit of freedom and a little bit of a defined time, I think it would be just a little bit gentler and softer for ourselves.
Hmm.
And that can maybe grow if we can find space for it.
Absolutely.
But yeah,
Mm.
I want people to be happier.
Yeah. Well, you're doing that powerful work today through our conversation and
Oh,
all the work that you're doing in the world. So thank you.
thank you. Thank you. I think I'm trying. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
For people
Oh,
who are interested in learning more about your work, your podcast, where would you want to plug for them?
so if you just search Eva Oh, thankfully my SEO is not bad apparently. So I'm
Great.
everywhere. On the social media, my handle is usually You Will Please Me. And my podcast is called Tea Kink with Dominatrix Eva Oh. It's just me rambling, but people seem to like it.
I like it. I tuned in. It's good. It's good. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just random stories from my life, which seems to be a lot. Yeah, I don't know where they came from, but there's a lot there apparently.
Yeah. Mm. I'll have all of that in the show notes below. And it truly was such a joy to have you on the podcast today. Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you so much. Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, then leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcast. And head on over to modernanarchypodcast.com to get resources and learn more about all the things we talked about on today's episode. I want to thank you for tuning in, and I will see you all next week.